Hello, my name's SimPerfect, and this is my spring townhouse in The Sims 4. It's actually my first Sims video that I've put together for YouTube, largely it's the main reason I wanted to create this channel was to do like Sims videos, hence my name, SimPerfect. So here we are, finally getting things moving, and this townhouse itself is inspired by the local area that I live now. I've recently moved into a new area in South London, and there's loads of these really big, tall townhouses that I'm sure were built initially to house like one family and maybe their servants, but these days they've all been split up into flats and several different groups of people live in the same block. But ultimately they're still these beautiful old houses, it's just that they've been split up into different flats, and I'm sure that that's what this one is. It's based off a house that I can see from my window. It's not actually my house. I think that might be a bit weird if I were to put that on YouTube, but it's one I can see from out of my window right now, and I've been wanting to make it since I moved in a few months ago. I've actually made this the video itself, the recording was a few weeks ago, and it's only now that I'm getting around to doing this recording. Sorry that my videos are kind of sporadic. I think that's how it's going to be from for the near future. But anyway, I spent ages trying to get these windows right, and I'm sure even in the sitting that you're watching now, I don't quite decide on the last ones. They'll get changed again. It's not always easy in Sims 4, I find, to get exactly what you want. I think it's a little bit harder than it was in Sims 3, largely because of the creator style mode that we had back then, but that's to be expected. Gradually, as we get more DLC on Sims 4, I suppose it's going to get more and more detailed. You'll see in this video that I do mess around with stuff, and that's one of the strengths of Sims 4 is that actually you can be more, you can change your mind a bit more, you can pull a wall here and there, whereas on Sims 3, of course, you had to delete everything and rebuild it again if you just wanted to move like the room one square across. You had to delete it and rebuild it, whereas here it's very easy to just pick up and plonk it down somewhere else, or to stretch it into a different shape, that kind of thing. So with this being a real life build, or a kind of real life build, it's very much inspired by this house across the road. I've got a very kind of set template of what I'm going to build, but I do have to obviously tweak around, and it's not always the best thing for Sims, exactly what it is in real life. So one of the main things that's different is that basement with the open space. What we often have in London is a split basement, so that the basement actually has windows and it only goes halfway down into the ground. And then what you might call the ground floor, or the Americans call it first floor, is kind of raised up. You have to go up steps to reach that, and often quite a lot of steps. So I can't really build that in Sims yet. At least we don't have that kind of terrain modification. But what I could do was what I did, which is having a kind of sunken patio, which means that the basement still has windows, and so I do have a bedroom in the basement. It's still nice and airy, and it doesn't feel weird. It doesn't feel like you're in a bunker. The theme for this build is obviously spring. It's going to be nice and bright and vibrant and fresh looking, but it's also going to be very traditional. The family that I imagine living here would be a British middle class family in London, who are probably quite open to new things. They're not necessarily very traditional themselves, not very conservative, but they do have a certain amount of money behind them. There's going to be 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. I imagine one of them is the master bedroom for the parents, one is for a child, and then a basement one is for maybe like an uncle or an older child, like a teenager or something. Also 3 bathrooms, and then plenty of space for people to work and study and play. A big focus of this build was on nature, and so obviously the gardens are going to be pretty detailed, but I also try and bring as much nature as I can inside with the colour palette and with flowers and stuff like that. This is my first YouTube project with Sims 4, and obviously it's the Spring Townhouse. If you've got any ideas for what you want me to do next, if you've got any requests, then fire them my way, put them in the comments below, because I'd really like to make stuff that you want to see, obviously. Perhaps it's a summer thing, I don't know, a summer townhouse, or a summer beach house, or a summer something else, or maybe, you know, any random thing. I'd be really up for making requests at the moment, since I've got a bit of time on my hands, may as well do some stuff. Yeah, just let me know. I'd be well up for that kind of thing. You can see here I'm working on that basement level, which would be split if this were real London. We've got a lot of space downstairs. It's almost like a separate house for the people who live downstairs. I think that's quite a nice thing, so that you've got a bit of extra space. Perhaps if it's an older brother, like an adult brother of the main couple who are living there, you wouldn't want to be completely mixed in with the screaming kids upstairs. You'd want a bit of privacy. It's also a bit more adult downstairs once you see how I've decorated it. We're onto some landscaping here, and the main thing I wanted to capture from these people who live across the way is these beautiful cherry blossoms. That's what really captured my imagination on this house. And so we've got those two, slightly too pink. You know, it's a bit candy floss, but that's all we've got. So I'm kind of happy with it. We've got those two out the front. Statement, bang, there's spring right there. And I think it goes really nicely with the grey brick, and then I've got loads of white highlights throughout the build, and I think that's really the aesthetic that I've gone for. I love this path. You'll see that side path a bit more later. That's potentially my favourite bit about the entire build. More and more windows. I try not to make builds too big, because you get bogged down in the details, don't you? And as you should. It needs to be, it needs to be detailed. But if you have to do that for, 9 bedrooms or whatever, it doesn't half drag you down. Now we're onto some more planting. I love the romantic garden stuff. I think that's my favourite pack that's come out so far. It's got loads of interesting plants, and what you can do is mix them together with overlapping, like with the move object sheet, and you get a really convincing flower bed, which makes me very, very happy. So as you can see, I'm mixing together some different colours. We've got the pink already from the cherry blossom tree, and we've got whites and purples and blues, and by keeping fairly strict with the colour palette, it keeps it all together in a kind of ensemble. And you can see how I'm mixing together tall ones and wide ones and stuff like that, just to give it some sense of depth and make it look like a convincing flower bed. Tried some different terrain paints, but my favourite was actually the vanilla one, so I just darkened the edges instead. Now I'm going to put a bench here next to this cherry tree to have a nice romantic place to sit and canoodle, if you so desire. I love those foxgloves, the tall ones. Now this is definitely my favourite bit, this widening path that leads us from the front to the back garden. And by using this layering kind of technique, I'm saying it as if it's like some kind of, rocket science or something. It's just doing it until it looks good, isn't it? But by mixing these different layers, it makes it look like a really convincing English country garden, which is the kind of thing I'm going for. This is one of the moments where I'm slightly using artistic license. I'm not faithfully representing this house that I'm basing it on. I'm heightening it to make it even more beautiful than it already is. The gardening in this house is pretty nice, let me say that for them, but this is probably a step further, shall we say. You'll see some screenshots at the end with people like using that path. It's really nice. Now we're onto the back garden. You can see this glass, almost like a greenhouse, I suppose. That's where I've got the kitchen. It's really nice and airy, but I had a problem with this spot here. I couldn't figure out how to make that look convincing. I was trying to hide it with stuff. You know, the bit where the climbing roses finish. I think I may have ended up hiding it at some point, but it was a bit annoying while I was building it, to say the least. My ideas for this back garden was for it to be more like a fairy glade. So we've got some trees and this nice statue. But then most of the plants are white, kind of daisies or like these different blossoming ones. And then the lighting is what makes it really just a nice atmospheric place. Not quite a Midsummer Night's Dream, because it's obviously not midsummer, we're in spring, is the idea. But that idea of mysticalness and the magic time in between afternoon and evening, you can really imagine in this garden. Here I am putting in these nice lights. For a nice little fairy walk. Here's the front. I think I put too many lights in here. I do love the lighting in Sims 4. I tend to go overboard and then have to take a few out. So that's what I've been doing on this porch. Quite a grand porch. This is taken directly from my inspiration house. The columns. Pretty fancy. It's a bit Mary Poppins, you think. Oh my gosh, the way that those trees get lit up by those lights. That's one moment where I didn't like the lighting in the game, because it just makes those trees look like complete candy floss. So I had to scale back on the number of lamps that I put in. I love these though, the climbing plants. I find it's really important to make the house look lived in, or to make it look organic in a way. So these climbing plants do a really good job of distressing the house. It doesn't look like a doll's house if it's got things growing in it, or if it's got clutter. It makes it look real. And so I was really happy with how that side wall came out. Otherwise it was just going to be a blank brick wall. Right, and moving on to the inside then. Trying to find the different colours. I was trying to hope for like a fresh style. Loads of different colours, mostly natural. And then loads and loads of white and also wood. Just to make it seem nice and fresh, and that weird mix of traditional and modern that you get in these middle class houses, particularly in London. I presume it's not just London, but it's particularly trendy to have like splash colours in rooms, and then highlights of distressed wood and so on. This is going to be a dining room. I had this alcove, which was more of a problem initially than it was an intentional thing to make, just like this extra bit. I didn't know what to put in there, and so I fenced it off and made it like almost an exhibit. This room reminds me of the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, just generally the St. Petersburg architecture, which is block candy colours with white highlights, and so it's like a St. Petersburg dining room, you might imagine. It's a pretty grand way to dine, shall we say. This house is not entirely dissimilar to my house. What tends to happen with these old buildings is that they get split up into flats, and I live in a flat. It's nowhere near as grand as this house that I'm building here, and because I'm renting, it's nowhere near as decorated. It's standard renting design. It's all white walls and laminate flooring. But what I do is I'm a music teacher by day, and I go around to lots of people's houses to teach the kids, and so I see a lot of houses like this. Not always as grand, but often with these kind of design choices, things that make it look rustic but are really very wipe clean because you've got kids, or stuff that looks a bit fancy but is also very modern. And so it's that aesthetic that I'm going for, a really viable house for a family to live in, rather than being a showpiece, although it will be inevitably a bit of a showpiece as well, on top of the fact that it has to be a livable house. I love this kitchen with the openness right out into the garden. You can feel as if you're almost like reaching out and plucking the tomatoes from the soil before you knock together your salad. Right, this living room, I was quite pleased with how it came out. The colour palette again is quite reserved. It's basically white and blue, but that keeps it holding together. And if you have too many colours going on, it gets too weird. I know that's a bugbear with Sims 4, and that people complain that there's not enough options compared to Sims 3, where you had kind of literally infinite options for what colour to apply to your furniture. Whereas here we've got a finite number of choices which don't always match. You know how sometimes you find a piece of furniture which you really like the shape of or the style, but it just doesn't come in the colour palette that you need for the room? That is definitely frustrating. But I find you can normally work around it if you're willing to go along with the colour palette that they've offered you. So this dark blue goes quite nice with the white, stuck with that, nice and strong. There's a purple that quite a lot of things have an option on, and also a green. It's the same green throughout, kind of olivey green, which I really like. It does work, but if you want something other than that, you're kind of out of luck. I debated with myself what to do with this room here that I'm working on now, whether it was going to be like a Harry Potter broom closet for him to sleep in. In the end, I thought you can't have too many bathrooms in a family house, particularly if someone's actually having a bath. You definitely need like other opportunities. You've got screaming kids who, you know, don't have a choice. You just have to have loads of options available. One thing I like I've done here in the corner with the sink is I end up putting 2 mirrors at the, let me get my maths right, 90-degree angle? Yeah, a 90-degree angle with each other. So you can see yourself from the side as well, or kind of from the side. I quite like that. I realise the colour palette in that bathroom is a bit basic. It's just the standard blue, but you know, it's only a small room. Little entrance hall with shoes. Looks like I'm working on this open plan area. This is also a living space. There's a living space downstairs as well. Well, there's 2, I think, really. And then this one upstairs is more of a studio. So you've got all your artistic and pursuits, and a desk for like computer-related stuff. It's a place that should be pretty chilled, but is also productive and creative. I figure the kind of people who live here are not very uptight, you know, probably left-wing, probably pretty cool, even if they're, you know, even if they're a little bit older, still pretty switched on, pretty trendy. Here we go, we have yoga mats for them, and then the creative pursuits. It got a little bit pink, this room. I don't absolutely love that, but there's not too much pink going on in the rest of the house. So I like that there was at least a reference to the blossoms out the front also got into the house. Now this piano, I would never have a white piano, but it goes quite nicely with the particular colours scheme, you know, with all these white highlights. So I thought here, for this piano, and it's a bit of a show-off piano anyway in the entrance hall, you can get your little brat to give his recital in front of grandma. It's a bit of a show-off piece. And then just finishing off the room. As I say, if you've got any ideas for what you want me to build next, please do let me know in the comments underneath. I'm also going to upload this to the gallery on Sims 4, so try it out for yourselves, for your own families. Absolutely modify it. Let me know how you change it, how you'd prefer it. Okay, I think we're moving on to this bathroom in the middle here. Now it's a bathroom with no windows. I know that might be a bit odd, but it's like what we've got in our flat as well. It's obviously not ideal for damp reasons. If you're a boring adult like me and you think, oh my gosh, damp is the first thing that crosses your mind, then yeah, I presume there's going to be a way of filtering the air out, like there is in our bathroom. You just switch the light on and it automatically starts a fan so that the wet air doesn't just stay in the middle, and then it doesn't matter that it's not got windows. Now I realise I've made it black, which is also going to make it even darker than it already is without windows, but then I've done things like all these lights, and I end up with a bank of mirrors against this wall, for, you know, vanity reasons, but also it makes the room seem bigger. Standard thing to do. I've got the same wood floor in these two bedrooms. This yellow one is going to be a kid's bedroom, and the blue one, light blue one, is the master bedroom. And that's how I've kind of themed them. I didn't want them to be like absolutely completely different. It's just that this kid's one is themed yellow and the master bedroom is themed blue. I've tried to keep nature as a theme, and so that bed is the one that seems like it's been grown out of wood, and you've got the lamp there. I'm imagining a young but adventurous daughter living in this room, but there's no reason a son couldn't live there either. Moving on to the master bedroom, put in that walk-in wardrobe, because you've got to be a bit fancy if you've got a house like this. Nice little alcove for the bed itself. And then here's the thing that I get a bit kind of up in arms about, is that I think it's really a good idea to not work and sleep in the same room. It happens so easily when you like go to uni that you end up in this room which has got a bed and a desk, basically. And then if you're renting a room in a house, you just want all your stuff in that same room. And if needs must, you know, that's just how it has to be. But if you've got the opportunity, it's so good to not work in the room that you sleep, so that you keep your leisure and your work separate, and you get into fully leisure mode and you get into fully work mode. Now for me, playing Sims, then I want to make sure my Sims have that as well. And that means, what on earth do you put in the bedroom other than a bed? So what I've done is put these two wicker chairs. So you can just sit, I suppose, read a book, something chilled before you go to bed. So yeah, that long diatribe was to point out why I've just put two chairs in rather than maybe like a desk and a computer. Nice and fresh and blue. Quite sophisticated, I think, that bedroom. And now I'm onto this creative terrace, the veranda or the balcony. Fancy plants. A nice place to do some painting, looking out over the back garden. I tried to only put those flower pots underneath the window. Is that what they're called? Yeah, like a windowsill flower pot. Only in places that would be viable to actually water, so they're not just going to be hanging in the middle of nowhere. So on that balcony, I think was a good place to have them. In this tower, I put a big old chandelier, so if you sat at this computer, you'd be able to see up into the chandelier. I think that'd be quite nice. Right, we're onto the basement now. And although I've said that we've got this split level effect with windows leading into the basement, I was still a bit concerned about it being dark. So this room I'm working on now is kind of going to use that darkness. It's a bit of a chill out space. It's going to have a bar and a few chairs. It's going to be the place that you go when you're hosting a party, I reckon. And so I'm going to use the darkness and have a feeling of a kind of Spanishy flair going to it. The terracotta floor and the red walls. Now this is a bit OTT, I know, to have a steam room in a family home, but you know, it's not absolutely crazy. I wanted to give them the opportunity to have that luxury if they wanted it, people living here. And particularly for the kind of person I imagine living specifically in that basement, would maybe be a kind of party person, the kind of person who'd have people over for a party, and would know how to treat him or herself to a bit of relaxation. This other room here is going to be a gym, and it's a lot more modern than most of the other rooms in this house. I don't quite know how it turned out into a Mass Effect-y type industrial thing, but that's what I kind of think it's ended up being. I think it's alright. It's not absolutely crazy for a practical house like this. Here you can see a bit better now the Iberian flavour of this. Well, I was going to call it a pub. It's clearly not a pub. It's like a bar room, place for hanging out, and it also serves as an entranceway, a kind of central area for the ground, for the basement. And as I say, I like the idea that it's slightly separate from the rest of the house, so that whoever's living in this bedroom downstairs will have a bit of privacy. Yellow was another important colour in here, so this yellow and the kind of browny red I thought would make it look nice and sophisticated and just a little bit Spanishy. Okay, onto this other bedroom. That is green. You can't really see very clearly, but that feature wall is green. Black and white is the main colours for this. I wanted it to be a bit more modern than the rest of the house, whilst not being completely crazy. So it's wood panelling to keep it natural. That green is awful. As I say, I don't really like the rugs. There's not a grand lot of choice, so I've ended up with the same rug again, I think, as like directly above it in the living room. Not the end of the world, I suppose, but I would like a bit more choice with my rugs. I've not got any custom content installed. What I find with the custom content is that it's quite hard to make it look as if it's of the same graphical style. Sims 4 is a little bit cartoony, self-consciously so. It's in a few important ways less realistic than Sims 3, and I actually support that decision. I think it looks better, it looks more convincing overall if you go for an achievable level of realism, and it's pretty realistic, but it's just heightened in a way. Particularly the Sims themselves are very characterful rather than being like a real human who is frankly a little bit boring. And the same is true of the art style for the objects. And so, what people tend to do when they're making their custom content is make it absolutely photorealistic, which is great and a skill, but it then doesn't actually match the rest of the room, the rest of the objects. Okay, I'm on to some screenshots here. Here she is enjoying the bedroom seating that I provided. You saw the piano in the previous screenshot. Here's, I imagine, the mum of the family having some me time, doing some creative painting. This is like the cool uncle of the family enjoying the fairy garden out the back of the property. Ah, here's the daughter, kind of active daughter, ready for supper. This is the front. You can see the bench in use out by the cherry blossom. Here's the bedroom downstairs with cool uncle number 1. Ah, and here she is working the path to the side which leads to the back garden. I do love that path so much. Here's the uncle showing himself off a bit. We're about to move into the floor plans. This is the first floor by British standards, the one set of stairs up inside. This is the ground floor. You can see the piano and the kitchen. And then I think here is the basement with the bedroom and the drinking area. Here are the outsides. This is the front. And here's the back. If you've enjoyed, please like or subscribe. As I say, do let me know if you've got a request. I'm quite likely to actually make it if you put it underneath this video. And thank you so much for watching.